What drew you to derivatives and securities regulation?
I have an undergraduate degree in physics. I started out my legal career as attorney with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission in Washington. I wanted to do energy, public policy, use my science education, and nuclear energy seemed like an excellent mix of law and technology and politics. So I came to Washington to do that. I worked at the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and on Capitol Hill on nuclear regulatory issues, nuclear waste cleanup for the Department of Energy. But frankly, nuclear energy in this country was not growing. It was actually stagnant. So there really wasn't that much legal opportunity. It wasn't a growth field. I'd always been interested in trading. I think it's part of game theory. I've always been trading in markets and market-based energy issues. I left the Department of Energy in 2001. I was in Deputy Assistant Secretary in the Nuclear Waste Cleanup Program. And I saw a posting for a job on Capitol Hill with the Senate Subcommittee on Permanent Investigations. At that time, Senator Carl Levin wanted to investigate energy markets. There was an energy price spike in the spring of 2001 where gasoline went from $1.25 to $1.50 a gallon, and there was a national outrage over that. And so Senator Levin wanted to investigate. All the gasoline stations were all going up at the same time. He thought there was some antitrust issues. And he was looking for somebody with Capitol Hill experience, somebody with energy experience. It looked to me like a great opportunity to broaden my career out of the narrow area of nuclear energy into energy trading, energy markets. We were looking at it from an antitrust perspective, and everybody we interviewed told me that the oil companies do not control the price of gasoline. There's some factor of supply and demand at issue, but the oil companies don't control price. Price is determined by the market. The market where it really determines the price is the NYMEX, where oil is traded and gasoline is traded. And if you want to understand prices, you have to understand those commodity markets. So that's where that investigation led me, and that's how I sort of got involved in commodity markets. Now, the 2001 to 2009, when I was on PSI, was a time of great turmoil and a lot of volatility in the energy markets, in the oil markets, and the gas markets, natural gas market, as well as the petroleum market. So there was plenty to look into, and that kept me busy for 8 years. And from energy markets, commodity markets, I got into all the other financial markets that the CFTC is involved in.
How did your early work inform your career?
What became apparent to me and what stuck out to me is how important the regulatory structure and the rules of the road were in terms of market behavior. There were two types of issues. One is, whether people were manipulating the market or doing things illegal, and the other is, what is the actual market structure? What are people doing that's legal? And is the structure adequate to capture the forces? Obviously, people making money is why they're trading in these markets, and make money or preserve money, hedging, speculating. The ability of the market is to sort of corral these forces, these animal spirits, as some might say, into productive societal uses, such as ensuring that there's adequate investment, ensuring that people have price protection for in case of volatility, and volatile markets don't put everybody out of business. I got very interested in the market structure aspect of it. On the subcommittee on investigations, I felt, as a legislative body, what we could influence the most was the law and the regulations affecting markets. It was the Department of Justice, it was the enforcement authorities that really went after wrongdoers. But it was my view, and what I thought was most important was ensuring we got market structure right. So that's really what I became interested in. And that can be very technical detailed, what the CFTC regulations are, exactly how big your positions can be, and position limits and specific disclosures. And
what came out of the Brent Oil investigation?
The Brent Oil investigation was a very interesting investigation. The allegation, both from this refiner and a noted petroleum economist, very well-respected economist, who also expressed the very same concern about the Brent market. The concern was that somebody was squeezing the Brent market. It was something like 20 cargoes a month were coming out of the North Sea on Brent. So if you could get a hold of all those cargoes and sort of bottle them up, you could push the price of Brent up, just normal supply and demand. And this had happened. This has actually happened in the late 90s. Somebody took all the cargoes out of Brent and shipped them around the coast of India and held them at sea for a while. And because there was, Brent is a benchmark, okay, and it's priced out of the benchmark crude price is priced off the spot price of Brent there. And if you get all the cargoes, you can affect the spot price. And that was the allegation that this was happening again. The allegation was they were dumping them in the SPR. They were taking them off the market and putting them in the SPR intentionally. And it was actually, I'll name the company. It was BP. BP had the cargoes of Brent, and the allegation was BP was dumping them in the SPR, and that was spiking the price of Brent. Well, we started looking into it. We interviewed a lot of market participants. We got the records of the SPR deposits from the Department of Energy. We worked with DOE on it. We got all the SPR records. We tracked all the cargoes of Brent from the North Sea for a several-month period. We tracked the price of Brent and WTI, and indeed, there were price spikes, $1 or $2 a barrel associated with these deliveries. So we called in BP and said, okay, you must have known that dumping all this crude in the SPR was going to spike the price of oil. What's going on? Why'd you do it? And I said, oh yeah, we knew it, and we actually didn't want to do it. The Department of Energy made us do it. So I said, what? And they said, yeah, DOE made us do it. We didn't want to. We knew that if we put all this cargo in the SPR, it was going to increase the price of oil. And we offered to delay. We offered to delay the cargoes and pace it out further. And in return for the delay, we'd deliver more barrels. So we push it forward. But DOE said no. And so we called up DOE and said, DOE, what are you guys thinking here? This is what BP said. Is that correct? They said, oh yeah, BP is correct. And so we said, well, why did you do it? And they said, well, we didn't want to do it either, but the White House made us do it. The National Economic Council made us do it. We didn't want to do it. We knew it was going to have a price impact. So we called up the National Economic, trailed it to the National Economic Council in the White House. And we said, basically, this is what BP said. This is what DOE said. Why'd you do it? And DOE had written memos to the Economic Council, which they gave us, saying, this doesn't make economic sense. We'll defer the deliveries for more oil later. The National Economic Council said, no, we want the barrels in right away. And National Economic Council said, we're not going to talk to you. Go away, pound sand. But what we pieced together from the people that we did talk to was what had happened is this was in early 2002 now. I mentioned 9/11. So Dick Cheney had given the order to fill up the SPR as fast as possible. And when the DOE and the economists told him, there's a more efficient way to do it, and really with no detriment to national security, because the barrels are out, okay? Whether the barrels are in the SPR or the barrels are in private storage somewhere on the globe, it's part of global supply. So you're not increasing global supply by putting in the SPR once it's been pumped out of Brent. You're just changing where it is. And so you can put it in later without any impact to national security or the global oil supply. Well, for optical reasons and whatever, they wanted to fill up the SPR ASAP in February, March of 2002, because they were planning to invade Iraq. And this was before we invaded Iraq. So they were planning the invasion, and when the invasion hit, they wanted to be able to say, we've got all this stuff in the SPR. We wrote it up in a report. We didn't make a big, Carl Levin didn't want to make a big political hay of it, because, their war was, by the time the report was finished and it was ready to go public, the war was going on. And it was like, there was a lot of other stuff. He was chair of the Armed Services Committee. He was in a sort of a delicate position in terms of the war. So we didn't have a big hearing. We didn't, call them up, but we did write the report up, and it has got the conclusions, which I mentioned. So it was an interesting event.